A wise philosopher once said, "Their war crimes are fictional, but my annoyance is real." While the original quote refers to writing charismatic villains, the same applies to writing flawed characters. Depicting someone as imperfect without making them incredibly annoying takes a lot of skill. Lucky for you, you don't have to figure it out on your own. I'm an enjoyer of patterns, so I analyzed a whole bunch of characters in different kinds of media to study their faults. What I ended up with are these 5 questions and this nice model to help you match a character to their ideal flaw. Also, hi, I'm Silver. My credentials are one self-published book and the 3,500 people who read my work every week. I believe that it's impossible to work towards a difficult goal unless you're very clear on why you're pursuing it. Which begs the question, what's all the fuss about writing flawed characters anyway? Why is it so important? The most obvious answer, and the first that comes to mind, is relatability. I'll spare you a reread of the story that coined the term Mary Sue, but if you're unfamiliar, feel free to pause and read it. This is obviously a very exaggerated example of what happens when you write flawless characters, but this applies to all of them. They feel like plastic replicas of real people, too shiny and vividly colored to be anywhere near authentic. For your audience to connect with a character and care about them, they have to feel genuine. The less than ideal parts of their personality are the very foundation upon which that bond is built. The second reason why flaws are so important are character arcs. A person who doesn't change in response to what life throws at them is boring to read about. Also, there is no better way to advance your plot than having a character's flaws sabotage their plans, goals, or general journey. The third and final reason is that character flaws have a big part to play when it comes to shaping the theme of your story. Picking the wrong flaws doesn't only make for annoying characters, it can and might make your story completely unreadable. As an example, Harry Potter is notoriously reckless. He has his saving people thing, right? What if instead Harry was a narcissist? If he leaned into his newly acquired fame and acted as if it was his due, flaunting it non-stop and milking his parents' sacrifice for brownie points? He would have been insufferable. Even if there was a fantastic character arc ahead and nobody would stick around long enough to read it. The point is, picking the wrong flaw for your character, especially a protagonist, can be detrimental to the story. Let's sum this up. While they're crucial in making your reader invested in the stories, just adding character flaws is not enough. You have to match the right ones for the narrative and the character's role in it. Now let's look at the model through which you can achieve exactly that. The first question you should ask yourself is whether or not your character is heroic. Please be wary, this is not at all the same as them being a good person. Is your character a paragon? Are they brave? Do they have an unfaltering moral compass or a strong sense of justice? Are they courageous in the face of adversity, selfless, compassionate? Well, in that case, you might indeed have a hero on your hands. If so, you've effectively won the lottery when it comes to dispensing character flaws. Heroic characters get to follow the path paved by the Greek tragedies and have their pick from any number of fatal flaws. Hubris, recklessness, stubbornness, bigotry, etc., etc. These are the big guns of this domain. They're fun to write, but they're also dangerous. For a fatal flaw to really hit home, you have to establish high stakes, personal or otherwise. If your character fails to overcome that flaw or at least make significant progress towards doing so, there have to be consequences. Otherwise, your readers might feel cheated and unsatisfied. Just a heads up. If your character is not a hero, the next question you should ask is, are they a protagonist? The reason for that is similar. There are flaws that are acceptable in protagonists but are rarely tolerated in other characters. My theory for that, personally, is that these specific flaws take a lot of screen time or page space to resolve. Mentioning them but then not giving them enough attention might leave a sour taste in your readers' mouths. That's not to say that you can't use these flaws on other characters, just do so with caution. Protagonist flaws, let's call them that, come in 2 distinct flavors, emotional or behavioral. To pick between the two, you will have to analyze the nature of your story and the sort of narrative you want to spin. In other words, let's talk genre and theme. Emotional flaws tend to work best in character-driven stories, romance, or stories that generally focus relationships. They're also great if you're going for any sort of redemption arc. Behavioral flaws, on the other hand, are fantastic for action-driven or plot plot-heavy stories. They also work well when the protagonist is a leader of some sort or there are complex team dynamics involved. Imagine a complex group operation is jeopardized by the inadequacy of one person. Isn't that a fun little twist? Some commonly used emotional flaws are self-doubt, guilt, fear of abandonment, and insecurity in general. The behavioral equipment would be impulsiveness, addiction, perfectionism, procrastination, and so on. If your character is neither a hero or a protagonist, the next question you should ask yourself is, are they an irredeemable antagonist? Let's pause on the irredeemable part of this, okay? Because antagonists with the potential to change or be good in some capacity get a very different treatment in fiction than their fully gone counterparts. I'm not even talking about redemption arcs this time. An antagonist can work towards overcoming their flaws even if they're a villain to the bitter end. The best examples of irredeemable antagonists that come to mind are Sauron, Voldemort, and the Joker. Sauron would have to admit that he's not the embodiment of perfection to have any character growth. Voldemort would have to acknowledge just how terrified he is of dying, and the Joker simply doesn't want to be saved from himself. These characters can't become better because they don't want to be better. Redeemable antagonists, for example, are characters like Zuko, who have a proper redemption arc, Snape, who's awful but at least has some nuance to his motivations, and Jaime Lannister, who desperately wants to be whatever Brienne of Tarth has going for her. I'm not going to expand about Jaime and Brienne because it's my favorite dynamic out of everything George Martin ever wrote, and if I start talking about it, I won't ever stop. So let's take a moment to talk about Snape instead. Snape might have had a chance to grow out of his flaws if he had a healthy support network at any point in his life. Maybe he didn't want to be saved, to be helped, to be plucked from the path of evil, but I feel like he wouldn't be too opposed to it either. This is a major difference between a redeemable antagonist and an irredeemable one. If a chance at redemption just landed in their lap, would they squash it or nourish it? Would they allow someone to save them from themselves? That's how you tell which is which. If your character is indeed an irredeemable antagonist, you get to play around with the darkest character flaws. Cruelty, coldness, possessiveness, emotional detachment, lust for power, and so on. You have the opportunity to portray these flaws in a way that would bar your antagonist from forgiveness even if they did have a change of heart. They're that bad. Don't be intimidated, these are fun! And you can always go for something less extreme like any of the 7 deadly sins. These are great, always. At last, for the final question, if your character isn't a hero, a protagonist, or an irredeemable antagonist, should their flaw affect their relationships or their goals? As before, relationship-related flaws are best for character-driven stories, the exploration of group dynamics, and narratives that center emotional growth. Anti-heroes and secondary antagonists fit very well here, as do morally gray characters in general, because these sorts of flaws can make a morally ambiguous character more relatable to your audience. Goal-related flaws, on the other hand, work best in high-stakes plots centered around external conflict. They're the absolute gold standard for overly ambitious characters and for parallel arcs of we're not so different after all sort of stories. I really like giving these to villains, especially villains who are heroes of their own stories, which is my favorite sort of villain to write. The vast majority of my antagonists get stuck with flaws from this particular bucket. Examples of relationship-based flaws are jealousy, mistrust, fear of failure, and overconfidence. Some goal-related flaws are obsession, ruthlessness, pride, tunnel vision, dishonesty, etc. We've gone through the whole model, but there's 2 more things you must remember. First, rules are meant to be broken, and none of my suggestions matter if they would take the fun out of your writing. These are guidelines that are meant to help you, not a cage for you to lock yourself in, okay? Okay. Second, and equally as important, the best written characters have multiple flaws. Picking one as the worst offense is really helpful, but you should always pick more secondary flaws. Now that we're familiar with the model, let's take a look at some examples. Harry Potter is a very clear, simple one, so let's start with that. Is Harry a heroic character from the get-go? Yes, he is. He may not have all the traditional qualities we'd associate with a hero, that's something he'll grow into, but he's notoriously courageous and loyal to a fault. For that reason, the first answer would be a yes. Harry's main flaw, recklessness, suits him perfectly, both because of his backstory and because it allows us, the readers, to experience more of the world from his perspective on account of him not shying away from danger. Tony Stark, and especially his depiction in the first Iron Man movie, is a masterclass in writing character arcs. While he does end the movie as a heroic character, he doesn't start it as one. That's the whole point of the story. Let's run him through this model. Is he a heroic character? No, he can't be, because being a hero is the end point of his journey, not the beginning. Is he a protagonist? Most definitely. Now, should we go for an internal struggle or a habit-based flaw? Con quiero betis and Big Boy take both. Tony grapples with a severe lack of purpose. He's wealthy, successful, and brilliant, but he seeks some sense of meaning to his life. Some gaps can't be filled by nihilism, and while his efforts are commendable, they get him no closer to solving the issue. He's also very emotionally detached, which expands on the first flaw and just makes it infinitely worse for him. Poor guy! As for habit-based flaws, there's the obvious overindulgence, but also his arrogance. I always felt that in his case, the mindset was more ingrained than innate, like a bad habit, but either way, it's yet another aspect of his character that's to blame for making him miserable. Characters who change their archetype mid-story tend to be very interesting, but are more complex on account of it. Don't be surprised to have them riddled with many different flaws. The third person in the hot seat is Albus Dumbledore, who is neither a hero, a protagonist, or an irredeemable antagonist. However, I would argue that he has a bit of the irredeemable antagonist sprinkled in, and that makes the character all the more fascinating. Dumbledore very carefully chose not to let Harry know he was a Horcrux. His main flaw is arguably the fact that he'd sacrifice everything and anything for the greater good, placing himself firmly in the ambition but at what cost bucket. Still, Harry was willing to sacrifice himself despite knowing the truth, proving that Dumbledore was just being a manipulative jerk like he always was throughout the entire series. The thing is, Dumbledore doesn't get the irredeemable antagonist treatment because he is dead. His manipulative nature was a massive flaw he never got over, and if he was any less lucky, it could have doomed his entire plan. His judgment was wrong. A lot of what he did was wrong. There's a very good reason why fanfiction often depicts him as no less of a villain than Voldemort. With those three examples explored, I'd like to share a more personal one. Frey is the protagonist of Catalyst, my one published novel. She may have had the makings of a hero, but the dark fantasy world she exists in broke her spirit before she ever got a chance to walk that path. When picking her character flaw, it wasn't just her I had to take into account. There's another character in the story, Sylvan, who serves as her foil. I wanted to make them reflections of one another, of what could have been, as they have eerily similar backstories but very different trauma as a result of them. For that reason, I couldn't go with habit-based flaws, not if I wanted to keep that parallel. So here's what I settled on. Frey, as a result of the betrayal she endured, is completely incapable of relying on others. Sylvan, as a result of a similar betrayal, is completely unable to rely on himself. Over the course of the novel, both of them, with a lot of help from the supporting cast, make a lot of progress towards overcoming their flaws. All of it culminates in the final battle of the book, where Sylvan and Frey triumph over a significantly more powerful antagonist for one reason and one reason only. Frey had grown enough to rely on Sylvan, and Sylvan had grown enough to allow it. More than that, the enemy, who knows them both very, very well, loses that battle because they didn't expect Sylvan and Frey to be capable of working together in that way. As I said before, the character flaws can and should shape your plot, especially in character-driven narratives. If you'd like me to put more characters through the grinder in a similar manner, let me know in the comments below. This was fun and I'll be happy to analyze more. This video is actually a request by Yanis. Thank you, Yanis. So now you guys know that when I say I take requests for videos, I mean it. If there's anything you would like me to cover, let me know in the comments below or contact me on any of my socials and I'll be happy to oblige. In the context of flaws, if you're into characters who use the thin line between being a hero and a villain like it's jump rope, check out this video I made about monstrous heroes and noble villains. If you found value in this video, subscribe for more writing advice. All the work that goes into these videos is really worth it when I know that people actually enjoy it. And thank you for sticking around until the very end. I hope you have a lovely week and happy writing!